guys, thank you for coming and for letting me speak. I'm Vittorio Giovara, and I work at Vimeo, and I also work on several open source projects. For those who don't know, Vimeo is a web streaming platform founded in 2004, and it was the first one to stream HD videos in 2007, and it was the first one to get color right in 2013. Vimeo cares a lot about colors because creators care about colors. Color is a very important tool that art and the creators have and that they use. In this talk, we are going to go very technical in how current generation technology works for color, and we will see some mistakes that were made and something that we learned along the way. So there is no denying that colors is a complex topic. Most of it, in my opinion, is because it's a difficult terminology. So my approach to explain colorimetry is to start from the very beginning, how the eye works. The eye is a marvelous machine that has a single job to convert the light that we perceive from outside into neural impulses. And it does so by focusing the light through the pupil onto the retina, which is a surface of cells called cones and rods that are designed to capture light or color. This has inspired us to create the RGB model. There are different cones that capture different wavelengths of light, and we subdivided these cells into three categories, LMS, that capture red, green, and blue, respectively. And so we created, in 1920, the RGB model. A model is kind of the language that we have when we speak about color. Light is theoretically infinite, and it's harder to manipulate. So what we do is just associate some wavelengths to some certain well-known colors. Colors are usually a model is projected on a chromacity diagram, which is just a Cartesian, a 3D space. This is a cross-section containing all the visible colors. You can see on the borders very saturated colors, and in the middle, white, the so-called white point. As I said, the chromacity diagram is a 3D space, and this is a cross-section at average luminance. And however, a color model is not all. We need another tool. We need a color space. A color space gives us the grammar. Like if the model gives us the language, the color space gives us the rules that we are able to use to transmit this information. A color space is defined by the primaries, which are a triangle defined by three primaries coordinates that are mapped in the chromacity diagram. The area that we are able to see is called the gamut. How do we select the right color space? Well, it all started in the 1980s, and we have a Dr. Pointer, it's his actual name, friend with Dr. Strange, probably, and who selected all visible light, all the light from the colors from the visible objects, and mapped on the chromacity diagram. This is the region that contains the colors that are actually existing in reality. Everything outside are the colors that are artificial, that they do not exist. So one of the first color spaces created, it's BT601, tried to map most of this region so that it could be used for what are now called ST transmissions. And we can go on in trying to map more and more this region. This is what BT709, Display P3, and BT2020 try to do. They try to map as much as possible the reality of colors so that they can be reused and transmitted correctly later. We see that only with the BT2020 we cover most of the pointer's gamut. And we can see that there are even more color spaces available, and these ones are defined in so-called specifications. A specification is a collection of properties and rules that define a color space. And to define a color space, this is true for any standardization body, IATU, SMPT, SCI, and DCI. You need the three fundamental properties: the color primaries, the matrix coefficients, and the transfer function. The color primaries, as I just showed, are just the coordinates on the chromacity diagram of our color space. The matrix coefficients are needed because you usually don't stream plain RGB. You need to convert it to something else. Usually you use YCBCR, and for the less initiated, YUV. That has some nice properties for streaming, so that you can subsample it. You can stream only the luma to get a black and white signal. But the important thing is that I call it an encoding system rather than a color space. YUV and RGB are the same color model with the same color space, two different encoding systems. So in order to convert from one to another, you just have to apply some coefficients, some constant coefficients, to either the RGB or the YUV. This, for example, is the operation that is performed every time we try to convert RGB to BT7 on IN. And there are two variants of this, because YCBCR can be either limited or for full range for various reasons. Another very important property is the transfer characteristic. The transfer characteristic is used to convert between a linear and non-linear signal. This was introduced in the early era of CRT. This takes into account the device, the hardware, the physical device signal response to the input signal. And by pure coincidence, it matches how the human light works, the human eye works, the human system. We are more capable of detecting differences in darker area rather than detecting differences in lighter areas. And this is also called a gamma function because the curve is defined by an exponent whose variable name is exactly gamma. As an example, the dotted line is my color, what I'm trying to convert. This is the response of my CRT. So I pick 202 as my gamma. What I have to do in order to let my audience view the signal exactly as I perceived is to apply a gamma correction, which is just the inverse of the gamma function that I'm subject to. It's interesting that there is no real standard. It was mostly just they chose just a value and kept it that way because nobody changed television that much back in the days. Until 2011 with the so-called BT 1886. This specification defines a transfer function for screen of 100 candela per square meters, or so-called nits. This is the luminance of the screen, that is the light that a flat panel is able to emit. In theory, there is no need to use this any gamma if all the colors were already there. For example, if we were able to broadcast 16-bit signals, we can skip this step altogether. However, it's very costly. We are already struggling in broadcasting 10-bit, so I can't imagine broadcasting 16 right now. So the other approach that we did is to improve the gamma curve that we currently use. And this has led us to HDR. HDR is basically a new transfer function that is not calibrated for a standard dynamic range screen of 100 nits, but instead it can go over. It can go over, and this comes at a slightly high cost of updating everything throughout your pipeline. Camera need to be updated. encoding system needs to be updated, codec needs to be updated, displays need to be updated, players need to be updated. And also terminology needs to be updated. Since the terminology, as I mentioned, it was very confusing, they tried to make it even more confusing. But in practice, these terms, OETF, EOETF, and OOTF, just match where the conversion between light and the digital system, digital signal happens, whether at the camera or at the screen. Another requirement for 10-bit is for HDR is 10-bit, which is sometimes inappropriately called white color gamut. Explaining 10-bit would require a completely different talk, and that's why I added this link to the slides if anybody wants to watch it later. In short, is a technology that reduces the bandwidth, increases the number of quantization levels, improving the colors and improving compression efficiency, but slowing down the encoding process. This is why several people in the industry are waiting to upgrade their codecs, especially in broadcasting. When they're going to deploy HEVC, or in our case, VP9, we should probably deploy 10-bit so that we don't have any backlog and we can already use HDR when There are two different main standards, HLG and PQ, which are gathered together in BT2100. And their conversion and some advice, there's nothing normative, but it's an interesting read about the tone mapping, is present in BT2390. HLG, hybrid log gamma, is a curve developed by BBC and HK, and is standardized as ARIB STD B67. It's a freely available standard. You can download it, watch it, read it, and implement it. It's a standard transfer function that works at the camera level, so it's an OETF. And there is no luminance limit. It can work on any, it's variable. And there are two main properties that makes this transfer function really interesting. The first one is that it's backward compatible with the BT1886 at the cost of course, reducing darkness. And the other one is that it supports surround illumination. These devices capable of that support HLG can modify the transfer function in accordance with the lighting condition of the viewer. This is the signal response of a BT709 and HLG signal. We can see that the initial part is they match for, I think it's about 60%. And then the surround illumination, we can see different behavior of the HLG at different luminance of the room present in the present where the television is being played. The other curve is a PQ, perceptual quantizer, which is developed by Dolby, standardized in SMPTE 2084, which is not freely available. It's a unique curve in the sense that it standardizes how the display should work, and it standardizes a theoretical 10,000 nits luminance display. In short, it's a curve, of course, that maps each quantization level to the luminance level. So, for example, on a 10-bit, 10-bit can represent there are 1,023 levels. It can be shown only on a 10,000 nits display. A commercial implementation of PQ is HDR, which is not a real standard. It's a collection of recommendations, which uses the PQ and additional metadata, as we've heard. Can be easily streamed with HLS and Dash, but it's not backward compatible. You need to have separate renditions that you have to tone map in some way. As we heard, there is a static metadata. A variant of HDR10 is HDR10 Plus, which has dynamic metadata that changes every frame. One of the metadata that we're going to talk about is master and display. And it was introduced because there is no display capable of showing the gamut of a BT 2020. So what I did was introduce this metadata to record the colors of the mastering display, where the grading has happened, so that the director could give it its own cut to the colors present in the scene. This is created what's so-called a BT 2020 container, in the sense that the BT 2020 is the nominal color range, and the mastering display, in this case, is a custom one that I made up, is contained, and both these information are sent to the rendering engine, which will tone map any color that is not capable of reproducing. The other one is a content light level, which since there is no 10,000 nits display, and probably it's a good thing since in a dark room would be hard to keep watching. There is additional metadata that records the maximum luminance present in the video. And this is a very important settings because the rendering engine needs to be informed on what's the maximum luminance present in the stream, so that it does not clip. What I mean is that in case in the current generation high-end televisions that are at around 1,000 nits, I can use only 769 levels of quantization. Anything else will be clipped. So the rendering engine needs to bring back with the tone mapping any value that is found outside. Finally, there is a dynamic metadata, which I don't touch much. Is standardized in SMPT 2094, which is a sort of crazy specification with different application layers and very political. One of these applications is Dolby Vision, which works in HEVC at 10 or 12 bits, I think, or in HEVC with enhancement layer. There are some unclear points in using that technology, but the main problem is that it's hard to choose a winning technology because there is no official subjective way to determine whether which HDR signal is the best one. However, I think the market will give us an answer in which there is no company that is not supporting HDR10 that supports Dolby Vision or HDR10. So for the time being, HDR10 would be probably the HDR curve to adopt right now. So now that we know everything about the different color spaces, we need to carry this information around. And in order to do so, we have to use some codecs. There needs to be some space in these codecs for us to signal the right information. We'll start from the best one, which are the ones from MPEG ITU, H264 and HEVC. They define all three and more properties. All properties are clearly defined. Everything is very well explained. And they are so good that they ripped out this portion of the specification, of the video specification, and moved it to a separate standard called coding independent code points, in which they offer an overview on all the possible values that you can find in these codecs. And of course, they have a 10-bit is present in both standards. When we got to VP9, situation is a little bit more complex. When it was released, it did not have initially a 10-bit profile. It was added later. This has caused some fragmentation you have to be aware of depending on your market. But the biggest problem is at the syntax level. The variable color space has no space at all. It's defined as a 3-bit variable, and only a few color spaces were defined. And there are no color primers, no color transfer. So theoretically, you can't do HDR with VP9. However, there is a workaround. And so you can embed the static metadata in the container, which is kind of fine for the standards you control, like WebM. But for MP4, which is a standard that is not under VP9 control, its situation gets a little bit messy. There are some duplicated values and some possible incompatibilities. But the situation is much better in AV1. Thanks to an extra proposal, we have more space in color space, and we have a new variable that allows us to do HDR and additional transfer functions. It's going to be released as with the 10-bit immediately from the start. There are some minor peculiar colorimetry choices that hopefully will be fixed before the standards is ready. And moving to the next topic, the browsers. Browsers act as a player. They decode the video and then bring the information that we've seen before and pass it along to the rendering engine, which is usually OpenGL or DivX or DirectX. And here the situation is a little bit of a Wild West. The first one is Safari. Not because Safari is especially good, but because it uses QuickTime as its rendering engine. And the rendering engine of QuickTime is really, really good as far as color space goes. The QuickTime is one of the best. I think it's there's QuickTime and MPV and VLC3, which do color conversion correctly. For the reason they can be declared the first ones to fully support HDR on the desktop and probably mobile as well. The next ones are Firefox and Chrome, which they have a kind of shared story. They did not support any color conversion at all, despite our insistent requests, until YouTube started serving BT709 files, and so they started implementing it. Unfortunately, Chrome chose the wrong coefficients, and colors looked wrong for a long time until Firefox also implemented BT709 and fixed the coefficients used in the shared library. This is a great example of open source collaboration, in my opinion. I was going to say that one thing that Chrome has that Firefox doesn't is a full 10-bit pipeline. But this changed today because somebody knew that I was doing this presentation. So probably I should do more presentation to get more things done. And I think they are working together to get some efforts to get BT 2020 and more HDR in the browser itself. In conclusion, we presented the state of the art of colorimetry, but we must not forget that the main protagonist of this talk is color. Color is one of the best tools that painters of all ages, especially in modern art, in which they prefer to represent color over shape, is an important way to enhance the message and artistically express oneself. And this is true not only for painting, but for movies as well. The ones that I listed here have play with color. You can actually see Kung Fu Panda here. You can actually tell whether the character is an enemy or is a good guy by looking at the color of the scene. And The Last Emperor plays with the colors that are present in the Chinese culture. And Billy Elliot plays with the colors in enhancing its message across during the whole movie. And so my final words are that I think we should do whatever it takes to deliver the artistic representation of the director, of the creator, to the final audience.